Excuse me, Liz, if the meeting started, we can't hear anything online.
Yeah, we can't hear anything.
Okay, can you all hear us now? Online?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Rob, I just read the preamble. Did you want to talk about any conflict you may or may not have?
Yeah, I should just say I'm a member of the Elks.
Thanks, Rob. Sorry, Neil. Or, I'm sorry, Tony.
Tony DeLuca, I have a potential conflict. I'm the executive director of the Little Falls Youth and Family Center. We have two projects identified for potential funding.
Neil Rosenbaum, we may be involved in the any of the youth and family centers projects in construction. We may be part of the Dairyman project, and we've been approached by the Elks Club to manage the room rentals if they end up doing a in or Airbnb. It's Mark Blask. I'm a member of the Elks.
Mary Ellen McGillen, the Elks.
Dan Carter, member of the Elks.
Chick, member of the Elks.
Nobody's gonna be able to speak for the Elks.
Some of the real members of the Elks.
Thank you. Please inform the co-chairs during the meeting if the need to disclose a conflict arises unexpectedly. And of course, then recuse yourself from discussion or voting on the project.
Tonight, we're really gonna focus on the project that we didn't get to last time. We have a couple updates because if you recall, last time we met the very following day, we had our public workshop with the community to get their feedback on their preferred projects. We also have had a couple more pieces of public feedback come in, so you'll all have a packet in front of you that's paper clips. So we'll go through this a little bit more, but it does have the results. We did the DRI dollar activity with public at the public workshop. We did it with high school students that we met with earlier in the planning process, but then we also had a survey online for anyone that was participated in the public workshop or anyone that was interested to pick their top 10 projects. So those results are in here. And then also we had a middle school class put together their thoughts and identify their top priority projects as well. So that's also in your packet. So after we go through some of the public feedback that we get, and we'll summarize it, you all have kind of the detailed rundown in front of you. We'll talk quickly about, again, revisiting project evaluation criteria, and then we'll jump right into the project, starting with the new development, redevelopment project types, and then we'll come back to the public improvement projects that we had discussed last time, and had a pretty good discussion on priority ones that were deprioritized. We wanted a little more feedback from the public, and then there. So everyone online, I'm glad you all can hear us now. Sorry at the very beginning of the meeting for that. But if you could hold your questions until the end, we will make sure we have time for questions both here in person as well as online. And also feel free to populate the chat with questions as we go, and we can answer them. So as I mentioned, we just had our second public workshop. It was over at the high school on May 12th, right after our last LPC meeting, where everyone got their $10 million and distributed to the projects that they wanted to see built. We then, just this last Monday, went back and met with a group of government students over at Little Falls High School and repeated the activity with them. And then we will be having our next LPC meeting so not quite a month from now, about 3.5 weeks from now on June 21st, which I'll flag is a Tuesday. not our typical Wednesday, but we did want to try to get this in, as our deadline for putting together kind of that final slate of projects and the strategic investment plan really is quickly approaching with the end of June.
I had one for June 1st, that's not a meeting. On my calendar? No, okay.
It was back.
Yeah, there was a lot of shifting
Yeah,
after the last.
Well, I had something else on that anyways. Perfect.
Good question.
Yeah.
So this slide right here shows some of the top projects. What we did is on the left, you'll see public workshop results from the DRI dollar activity, and then the activity results with the Little Falls High School on the right. And what we did was pooled as close to $15 million worth of projects as possible. So again, the goal tonight and at the very next meeting is to get our projects down to about $15 to $18 million worth of DRI funding requests. So that's kind of why we drew this threshold right around 15 million, to give you a sense of, both from the public workshop and Little Falls High School, what were those kind of projects that fell within that top tier. This next slide highlights the similarities across the two groups. So in total, there was about $6 million worth of projects that were identified as priorities at both the public workshop and among the high school students. Those included the Main Street Enhancement Fund, or the Downtown Grant Fund, the City Dog Park, the Main Street Canopy, Sealy Street Promenade, public restrooms, and the Little Falls Youth and Family Center. Take a look too at the middle school feedback. So we didn't include that up here just because it was a slightly different process. So the middle school students, there was about 94 seventh graders, whose teacher asked them to review all of the projects under consideration by the LPC and identify their top projects and explain why they picked that one project. So Sealy Street was identified as 12 kids, identified Sealy Street as their #1 choice. The other top ones that overlapped were also the dog park. That was the most popular among the middle school students. And the YMCA, or the Youth and Family Center, was also captured and kind of overlapping with these ones as well. The final piece of information that you all have is just a sheet that summarizes the public feedback that we got on a public survey. So again, that wasn't totally equivalent. People weren't limited to spending $10 million. We just asked them to pick their top 10 projects. So again, restrooms came out on top. Canopy was also very high, as well as the Downtown Grant Fund, the Youth and Family Center, and the dog park was relatively high. We had 9 respondents to that survey. So you all have printouts of these. These might be helpful to kind of just refer back to as we're talking about projects too. Anybody have any questions about?
The first number on these, top 10 projects is what, the number of first place votes? On the left column?
Yeah, that was the one that received the most votes, and if you flip it over, there's the full title is associated with it. It's just the
Okay.
actual list, not the graphical form.
Okay.
Yeah, so it will show you the number in the middle refers to how many votes it received. And then there was the opportunity to, for anyone that participated in the online survey to, just provide any comments. You'll see a few just. So, end of that sheet. Did you get this project?
Sure.
So just to recap really quick, the things to be thinking about as we look at each project is thinking about how they align with the city's DRI goals, but also the state's DRI goals. Whether that project will really have potentially catalytic effects. So if that project's built, what other investment is likely to be attracted, both public and private, because of that project? Project readiness, again, the DRI is really looking at funding shovel-ready projects that can be built and implemented in the next 2 to 4 years, once funding is received. So projects that are pretty well developed, ready to either go through full design and then bidding and construction. Cost effectiveness is also a big one. So thinking about not only how feasible and reasonable is the cost, but also what other funding sources are project sponsors potentially leveraging? Are they able to pull in other funds, or is it largely just using the DRI? Capacity is really important, so understanding the capacity of project sponsors and that they have essentially a demonstrated ability to implement projects, but also to administer state grants, because that is a big part of getting the project built, is working with the state and administering that grant fund, or those grant funds, and then also their ability to not only get the project built, but to really succeed a long-term successful project. And then finally, and most importantly, community benefits. So making sure that the projects, as we think about them, who's benefiting? Is it just the project sponsor, or is it gonna have broader benefits to the community as a whole? The goals for tonight's meeting, number one, we're at about, we'll see in a second, I think we're right around $25 million worth of DRI funding requests. We'd like to get that down to about 18 million, if possible. 18 to 20 million would be pretty comfortable, so that at our next meeting, it's just a couple final decisions that need to be made to get us within that $15 to $18 million range for the projects that are included in the strategic investment plan. So some of the language and kind of categories that we started using last time is, one, identifying priority projects. So which are ones that we just, you know, that you want included in the strategic investment plan? It's helpful to identify those now. Ones that still need more information before you make a determination. So tonight is really the night to, if you have questions of the project sponsor, if you want to ask project sponsors to, you know, provide additional information about proposed uses, provide additional information about funding sources, that, you know, let us know. We'll go back to the project sponsors, have those conversations, and can present that information at the next meeting to inform your decision. There's also the opportunity to, project costs and DRI funding requests are still kind of in flux now. So if you'd like a project sponsor to consider a different DRI funding request, that, you know, let us know tonight, and we can go back to the project sponsor and see if it's also a possibility. And then finally, if there are any, what we're calling pipeline projects, however you want to call it, but these would be identifying projects that you just feel are, you know, don't fully meet the evaluation criteria we just discussed and are really just better suited for a different funding source. These will still be mentioned in the strategic investment plan, but they won't be listed as those priority projects for the state to consider for selection. But we will note them as important projects, to keep them on the state's radar for other state funding sources. So we're going to start with all of the new and redevelopment projects. Just as a quick recap, there's 12 of them, totaling about $9 million worth of DRI funding requests. You'll see total project cost is much higher. Then we'll introduce the one marketing and branding project, the downtown grant fund, and then we'll revisit those 10 public improvement projects that we discussed in detail last time. And those total to $18 million worth of funding requests. Slightly off, we're at $28 million worth of DRI funding, so we could shave 8 to 10 million off our project list. A little bigger task tonight than I originally alluded to. That would be great. And we have 24 total projects. So the first project are the city hall renovations. This total project cost is estimated to be $500,000, and the full amount is being requested through the DRI. And this project's been revised since we last looked at it, and it's been kind of revised to strategically look at some major, and remediate some major maintenance issues. So it's looking at roof replacements to prevent leaking that's actively happening and damaging the interior of the building, selective facade improvements to fix some of the stone and mason work, as well as interior renovations, specifically to council chambers where that leak has really drastically impacted the plaster and the interior condition of the building. So anybody have any questions?
You've really scaled this one back, right? We started a little over 2, you know, Chet and I met with the architect a couple times, just to try to get it, not a sexy project, it needs a new roof. That facade, that water damage is tough. I mean, it's the courthouse where the water leaks down into. It's just been a long time. So we thought that this was a fair price, you know, as we talk about other funding streams for other projects. In my mind, there are other funding streams for other city projects, like in Albany Street. We'll talk about that at some point. But I think that we could find money for streets because there's CHIPS money, there's paving money. It's more of a, you know, blacktop. We can generally find things like that. We can't find city hall money. Everybody has old buildings in New York State, and, you know, all the requirements for funding, you know, from SHPO to keeping it historically accurate, everything is obviously important with a 104-year-old building. So that's the background. Chet is down in Orlando at Disney World this week, or else he would be. And I told him not to call it, so you better not be out there, Chet. But it's $500,000, and he's certainly spent, a lot of time working on this. We just thought that it was a fair number. Maybe it survives and maybe it doesn't, but I just wanted to give that piece of it.
Did you get bids on the roof?
No, he has, that number is pretty accurate though, Dan, for the whole thing. So he did square footage, engineering, this is how much a roof is, and he didn't really ballpark it because there was, was that an architect or an engineer?
Oh, Scott.
Yeah.
Our architect came out and looked at it.
Okay, so they went through it. Facade work, it's council chambers, it's a new roof.
I would imagine the roof is a bigger chunk of that half.
It really is.
Does that include the top pinnacle one thing too, or is that okay?
The roof's really focused on the back part of the roof over the court, so you can't, it's the EPDM roof. There's,
Big flat one.
Oh, okay.
this would have some money in for some selective slate repairs, which is the roof that you're seeing in this photo,
Mhm.
but the slate overall probably doesn't need a full replacement. Includes some selective repairs, but full roof replacement on the back, EPDM. Was removed, like what were the big ticket?
I'm sorry, I don't think we can hear you online.
Can't hear anything. Murphy's Law.
Liz, the sound is not working online.
It's not working on mine either. I can't hear anything. It's because Elizabeth's muted.
Excuse me, Liz, can you hear us? You're muted online. Can anyone in the meeting hear? The microphone is muted in the meeting room.
No.
Yes, I just tried calling Liz's cell phone and so left a message.
No, we can't hear.
Oh, it seems they know.
Okay, online, can you hear us now? We just restarted the audio.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, keep letting, hopefully it doesn't drop again, but thank you for the notification. Let us know if it happens again.
Rob, did you have any questions about the City Hall project before we move on?
No.
Thanks.
Danny, are City Hall renovations well received by the state?
It's kind of hard to say. I mean, I would need to look at the project profile in a little bit more depth right now. Generally, we at this stage, are kind of just trying to learn more about the project. So I don't see why they wouldn't be, but I can't say for sure without seeing a little bit more information.
Thanks.
So is there a consensus to
Yes.
keep it at 500,000 and keep it in?
Yeah. Yes.
So the next one is the Youth and Family Center. This project primarily looks at the Furnace Street location, but also includes some improvements to the Main Street location as well, where the senior center is. And this is really looking at full renovations to the Jackson Street location. It hasn't been renovated in many decades. A lot of the community recreational spaces are in need of repair, and it's a big community resource. So these would provide some critical improvements to the Youth and Family Center facilities. So recreational upgrades from court surfacing to improvements within the other recreational spaces and community rooms. It also includes improvements to some of the emergency services that the Youth and Family Center provides from an emergency shelter perspective, as well as renovations to the general community rooms too. This total project cost is $1,450,000. They are requesting from the DRI $870,000. So this is a 60% of the total project cost is being requested through the DRI. The other gap is being made up by their capital fundraising. That is well underway.
So I guess our questions are for Tony. There's residents there, right? How many?
Up to 21 single-room occupancies.
Mm-hmm. That's gonna remain.
Yeah, capacity will stay the same. It would just be a renovation of the facilities as they stand. Footprint will stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tony, as we talk about shovel-ready projects, do you feel that this is close enough?
We're anxious. We can go with this in the fall or earlier. And from the standpoint of our capital campaign, we're getting some great feedback from foundations, and we're probably at about 60% of goal right now, and we're still in a quiet phase.
I'll note too, just to speak for Tony a little bit, just so we don't cross that line of conflict of interest too. But I think all informational questions, like Tony, feel free to answer, but Allison too, if you want to, I can help you unmute. But this project has already gone pretty far from a design perspective, has an architect working with them actively, putting together the plan. So from a shovel-ready perspective, they're pretty far into design as well. And ready, and our conversation's ready to start work as soon as possible.
I mean, one of our main criteria, and I wrote it down when you were talking, Liz, because I think it's the most important, is the community benefit, right? I mean, you could make some sort of straight-faced argument that the community benefits by City Hall having a new roof, kind of, because it needs a new roof. But the community definitely benefits by the Youth and Family Center. I mean, all of the input that we've gotten from the high school kids, from the middle school kids, I mean, it just gets used so much. It's just a standout project in my mind, but.
That's a service for when we talk about community benefits. We're not even talking about a
certain population of people, right? We're talking about the whole community. I mean, everything from, you know, they'll have activities there for the littles. I know when I stop in there, there always seem to be some middle school age kids in there shooting hoops and running around and doing their thing. I see adults, I see, you know, middle-aged people, seniors. I follow the social media, they're very active. And they host, you know, community events that aren't necessarily even for benefit of the Youth and Family Center, but to help other nonprofits and agencies out. I think it's a slam dunk. And, you know, I always going back to capacity, right? To say that they want 60%, they're going to pony up the other 40%. I think it's been demonstrated time and time again, the strength of the Youth and Family Center to be able to deliver and to not just put money to something and walk on, but to put money to something and keep going. So I fully want this to stand.
I agree.
So this is Danny. I think in general, just for all projects, it's also important to make sure that to be aware of the NYSERDA thresholds for the energy, you know, stretch code requirement. There were guidance issued to the consulting team with regard to kind of the stretch code compliance and everything like that. So just to, just to be aware of that and to, set up meetings with River Architects to kind of go over, the energy efficiency components of each project.
And I'll note, thanks Danny for noting that. And this project, working with one of our sub-consultants, has already scheduled meetings with River Architects and is aware of their requirement to meet the New York State Energy Stretch Code, and that's being considered as part of the project.
Excellent. Thank you, Liz.
Sorry, can anybody
welcome.
talk about the, any details about the renovation of community and emergency areas?
Sure, I could.
Yeah, Liz is gonna do it, Rob.
I can
Thanks.
add to that too.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Allison, because you've been working on it really closely.
Sure. So the project will include the roof replacement, window and door replacement, recreational area improvements, improvements to the shower and locker rooms, renovation of the upper floor emergency shelter units, and the Wi-Fi infrastructure and workstations at the Jackson Street location. And then improvements to the Main Street location would include a roof replacement, windows and doors replacement, renovation of the first floor public area, and renovation to the 3 transitional emergency apartments on the upper floors. And as a note about the community benefit, the organization serves 100,000 individuals annually with its programs and services.
I have a question related to the capital campaign. Just, so I'm thinking that there's more than one project, right, that's being put forward by the Youth and Family Center. There's this one, the child care,
Yeah.
and is there one
Just
more?
2.
Okay, so just 2. So are they part of the campaign, the capital campaign? I'm looking, I don't know.
Both, yeah, go ahead, Allison.
Sorry, I was on mute. So the capital campaign is contributing the other 40% for both of the projects. So the request is for 60% from DRI for both of the projects. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you, Allison.
Sure.
So you were saying in the silent phase, you've already retrieved 40%. About $400,000. Is that for both of these projects combined?
Yes.
Kelly, what do you think about the old YMCA, the new Youth and Family Center? What are your thoughts?
I'm all aboard. I love it. I think it's great. Everyone uses it. My kids use it. I use it for birthday parties. Swimming pool. I mean, who doesn't want a swimming pool when it's,
Right.
Like 8 months out of the year? So I think it'd be a great investment.
Oh, crazy question. We've asked the kids to play sandbox, and they said that this is their second highest priority. When they say this is their second highest priority, based on what these 2 projects are aimed to do,
is that what the kids want? When we're saying Little Falls Youth and Family Center, is what we're doing what they want, or would they be surprised in how the monies were being spent?
Oh, they've received the same description of the project as we just presented today,
So
so they're pretty well
that's the
aware.
thing. I mean, we shouldn't, I don't wanna say that we should be doing exactly what high school students want, but we've asked them to play in the
Right.
same role, and
Yeah.
I think we should respect that.
Yeah.
So as long as they're looking at these goals,
Mhm.
these attained, these objectives, I'm comfortable with.
Any other questions on this project, or will everyone, and what are your thoughts? Keep it as a priority project is what I'm kind of hearing, but.
Yes, both of them.
Yeah.
We'll do the other one in a second.
We haven't done the other
One at a time.
Still looking at the basketball, Dan.
Please note my abstention.
For the minute.
Okay. What was that?
I'm out for this one.
Oh, you are, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for reminding me. This is the next Youth and Family Center, project. This is to increase high-quality childcare within Little Falls. This again looks at two different locations, the 45 Furnace Street location, which already provides childcare within Little Falls, but also includes some upgrades and renovations to the Main Street location too, on that first floor. And the Main Street really focuses on making that facility suitable for emergency childcare. And in terms of emergency childcare, that facility on Main Street and those renovations would have the capacity for 35 children to go to that location. If there's ever, like what happened with the pandemic, when there's just childcare is closed down, that would then provide that emergency backup care. The other big piece of this project is a new 1,200 square foot addition to the Furnace Street location, and that would increase childcare capacity at that location from 36 to 50 children. The total project cost for this is estimated to be $650,000, and the DRI funding request is $390,000. Similar to the last project we looked at, and to Mary Ellen's point, the difference is being made up through the Youth and Family Center's capital campaign. And this project is also pretty well developed. They've already retained, they've been working with an architect, that's one of the renderings generated, so have made a lot of progress in terms of design and really understanding what needs to be done and kind of ready to get to work.
Just to add, so they have a plan for a second floor addition of the 1,200 square feet addition to add the childcare, extra room for the childcare program. And also the
Well,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Allison.
The temporary childcare also would cover things like snow days or teacher education days and other sort of emergency, but maybe less unusual events.
You know, that's helpful, Allison. That's actually that's where I was going to go. I was going to ask about, with the emergency, what would fall under that, in addition to, catastrophic pandemic-oriented things. But, I sit on the board for the Little Falls Hospital, and one of the things that we've talked about over the last 2 years is, what happens when schools shut down? What happens when we have to go back indoors again? People need to work most times to get paid. And when we have a lot of employees at the hospital, which is one of our biggest employers in the city, those people, a lot of times, they don't have options. And so if their children can't be in school or can't go to their daycare provider or wherever, what do? And so something like this, I think in an emergency setting, is a slam dunk. And even if you're thinking just everyday life, I regularly am contacted by people to ask, hey, do you know of a place or someone that can take, a 7-month-old, 2-year-old, et cetera, and I never have an answer for them, and that breaks my heart because we should be a community that has that capability, and I think focusing on that is rock solid.
Based on everything that was said, I complete agreement with the state, because the state is putting a tremendous amount of effort right now on childcare and workforce transformation. But because of that, there may be an awful lot of alternate funding for childcare to supplement this project where we don't use the DRI money. I mean, I can't believe the money that's coming out for childcare now, all of upstate. There might be something that we really want to take a serious look at.
And then Tony, just a similar question. I know you're not supposed to talk, but where are you as far as, project readiness?
Ready to go. And eager.
I mean, we learned so much during the pandemic, and one of the things is just the premium on quality childcare. I mean, front and center. I love this project. And especially, I love it more for $390,000.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, communities need access to, it shouldn't be a luxury. Communities need access to childcare in order to be able to be productive and go to work and do the things that we need to do as a society to function.
But Dan, in your opinion, are we better off putting it in the DRI or soliciting monies from the childcare bucket?
I think, you know, I think that, you know, you have to look at this as how it'll revitalize downtown, look at it with regard to the synergies that it would create with other projects. You know, on its face, you know, childcare is a truly essential component of a vibrant local economy. And creating a foothold for childcare to take hold will, you know, not only attract young families to the community, it will also create that sense of stability and kind of cohesiveness within the community that'll make people want to locate here. One of the main reasons that communities struggle to attract developers and attract, employees alike is that there's a lack of childcare. You know, particularly during the summer months when school's not in session. So I think in the grand scheme of facilitating additional development, you know, a lot of credence has to be paid to this, you know, project. But again, that's just my opinion. But I think that, you know, if I were to recommend something, you know, my recommendation would be to, you know, consider, the impact that this project would have on the community as a whole, as Laura pointed out.
Thanks, Danny. And just a small sidebar about time. We're about 48 minutes in. We're on project number 3. We can obviously take as much time as we want, but just throwing it out. These are important.
Not really, we can't.
They're important decisions, but I'm saying if there are some that we are all rowing in the same direction on.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, and been an advocate for affordable, quality childcare since I needed it long ago. I guess my question would be, have we looked at these other buckets of funding that's available? Because we're going to spend our 10 million really fast. So that would just be my caveat, I guess. But it's a priority.
Anyone who does not want to make it a priority?
Well, how would we go about finding out if these buckets are available or not in a timely fashion? So we need to make this seems to me like that might be far off, and I think most of
But
this is a good point for community development, childcare, so it's got my vote. I'm not really sure we want to hold it up waiting for the state to do anything.
I agree. I mean, this is money we know,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Renee, over the years, there's been a flavor of the month with the state, and then, well, what happened to this? I mean, Danny, I'm not talking about you specifically, being a state employee, but I mean, this is money that we know that we are getting. I mean, I wouldn't want to kick the can down, on something so important in the hopes that in October it's still important.
But the flavor is childcare right now.
It is, for sure.
No, I'm a yes on
Yeah.
both of these.
Can I ask a procedural question? This is not
Yeah.
related to the specific project, but does it ever happen that some of the projects that we propose, when the state's whittling down, they say, wait a minute, we could take this project and move it over to this other bucket? Or that's not, they either yes or no?
They'll probably yes or no at first. Go ahead, Danny.
It depends. I think that amongst like the partner agencies, it's possible, but it's not. But I think, for childcare, the pots of money come from different agencies that aren't traditionally involved in DRI, so it's hard we could, we could reach, facilitate a connection, we could reach out, but it's one of those things that would, the project sponsor and the community and then the state, through DRI, through this planning process, we could help, but it's not something that, typically happens with agencies we don't normally partner with in DRI, if that makes sense. But that, to be, the one thing that I would point out, and, if we're looking at other pots of money, the other pots of money could, be used to supplement and increase the scope of this project too. That's the other side, and sustain it going forward.
Thanks, Dan.
Or let's put a CFA in to even double that, to even enhance the project.
So everyone that supports this project, let me know. Anyone not? All right, cool. So we'll keep this on as a priority project. Next one is the Little Falls Public Library access enhancement. This total project cost is about $700,000 with a DRI funding request of $500,000. This project looks at improving accessibility throughout the entire library. The current elevator in the library does not work anymore. It's not operational. So this would be creating a new elevator shaft and then placing in a new elevator that would provide full access to the basement, first, second, and third level floors. This also would include a little bit of renovations to the third floor. The third floor is in fairly good condition, and with some limited upgrades and renovations, could open that whole third floor with the new elevator access to community spaces, from GED training to tutoring spaces, counseling spaces, et cetera. So again, this really focuses on increasing accessibility of the entire library for everyone, and making the third floor an active community space. It's underutilized right now and would just expand these services and community uses at the library if it was accessible.
This is another project that I feel is important to the fabric of Little Falls, and I think looking at the building and its purpose, it is another, gem on Main Street, and the library has gone through some incredible transformational times in as far as services that they're now providing. And I think this just gets it to another level of, not because the elevator is going to the third floor, but it does expand, the services considerably. So I would like to see this project included at the project request as a priority.
This is a tough one for me to comment on. Well, I'm allowed to, which is a good start, but I don't live here, so, but, and I know the library's a gem, but it already is a gem, and I just feel like with some of the other priorities, that I don't think it meets directly the guideline, not the guidelines, the goals. I don't think somebody's gonna not move here because I don't think doesn't attract visitors, and I know the Gloversville raised over $1 million from, local donors. It's a little bit bigger city, but they raised over $1 million and redid the Carnegie Library, extraordinarily. In the same kind of project, accessibility and exterior renovation and stuff. So I would just say, only don't doubt the importance of this building in this part of the city, but relative to the other things, I don't see it making my list.
Haven't they already renovated the interior of that?
The Child Center,
Yeah,
the Children's Center,
yeah.
they overhauled it on the first floor and the.
First floor has been redone.
Well, part of it,
Part.
not the full first floor, no. A lot of that's remained historically accurate.
Have they done a capital campaign in the past, the public library? I am a huge advocate for public libraries, but I just don't know, I'm not familiar enough with the, oh my goodness, the library. But it would seem.
I just saw Dean running down the street. Well, the Children's Center was privately funded.
Yep. Carrick Foundation, wasn't
Carrick
it?
Foundation.
How do they intend to fund the differential?
Some of it would be some fundraising. They're also looking at a couple other relevant grants, like the state construction fund.
It's an odd exercise because we need to put in between 15 and 18 million.
Right.
But do we put in projects that we don't think should make the 9.7 that we have? It's just, it's hard, and not being able to prioritize. Because in my mind, for 500,000, this project clearly makes the 15, 18. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just one voice. But is it, if we were just limited to the amount we're going to get, would that change, to Neil's point? So,
And, yeah,
But ultimately, we're not going to decide that. New York State is going to decide that.
correct,
So I would like to see it
yes,
in the running. at
yes.
least.
So we obviously need to put in projects that we think are worthy of this money. Where if we get the news in October and November that it was funded, because that's when we're gonna hear, then we will be sweet, that's what we wanted to happen.
Right, not shit, this one didn't make it.
Exactly. You know what I mean, Renee?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, we can't do a prioritization for the first 10 and then. Yeah, I mean, I think that's like.
Front and back of the
that's a
sheet?
little bit more fair.
Isn't that maddening? I mean,
Yes.
it really, it would serve us better if we could prioritize, but we're told that we cannot.
Right.
You know, in actuality, Danny, you're gonna know our prioritization. Right, Dan?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm privy to, the discussions around from the LPC, but ultimately, the projects will be moved to us on the slate. And then I'll have more context, to answer your question directly, I would have more context as to the community's preference for specific projects and the discussions around them. Yeah, so the short answer is yes, I'll know, what the community's priorities are, but ultimately it'll come to us in a slate. That's how they'll be selected. I did want to call attention to a point that Allison Madmoon made regarding childcare. She said that the childcare can certainly apply for both CFA and DRI funds for one project, but she said cautioned that the money through the Office of Family and Child Services is for I think it's for operating costs, and eligible applicants would have to be increasing existing childcare slots, if I understand it correctly. And Allison, you can type in the chat if I'm missing something, but she just wanted to bring that up in the chat.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Sorry, this is Allison Madmoon from ESD Mohawk Valley. I was having a hard time unmuting myself, but I think I figured it out. I just wanted to mention that the childcare project and any other capital projects, like Renee mentioned, can double down and also apply for CFA funds through various programs, including ESD capital grants. And that will just help defer the cost of the project. So she's right, they could apply for a CFA, they could also have DRI funds for the childcare project, and they could apply for money through OCFS if they're increasing childcare slots, which it looks like they are. But that money is specifically for operating costs. It wouldn't go towards the capital project. Just wanted to mention that.
Thanks, Allison.
one last thing about the library, how is that still being used as much as it did before smartphones?
It's used more.
Yeah,
now than ever.
it's actually pretty difficult to reserve the community room.
Oh, really?
There's a lot of groups that meet in there.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And another thing I would like to add is that, the library I consider as a provider of core services to the residents of this city. And I think it's worthy of the investment because of that. Just all the diverse services they offer right now and what they plan on offering with the expansion to the third floor area. I'd like to keep it.
Is there anyone who's opposed to having it move on. Deal. Rob, did you hear all this?
Yeah, I'm really kind of on the fence. I'm still kind of thinking this through. I'm appreciating all these points, but I'm just not sure.
Okay.
Do you all have any questions that you'd want answered for the next meeting, or like requests of the project sponsor?
How about for now, could we just keep that in abeyance
Yeah, I
for a
was
little
just
bit?
gonna say that.
Just
Can we
like-
set it aside for a
Yeah.
minute?
Sure.
See,
Yeah.
because it might change as the.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we'll
Exactly.
pause on that one for now.
Thanks, Rob.
This next one is the Dairyman, which is really pretty much new development. It's located at where that M&T Bank is right now at the corner of Main and Ann Street. And it would include the renovation of the existing M&T Bank, but includes a lot of new development around and above the bank to create a new commercial space right next to the bank that you can see in this rendering. And that commercial space will be about 3,600 square feet for a health and wellness center. They would also have some additional first floor, lower floor uses, so just under, that would provide a community room, property management. So this would all be supporting 75 new units of affordable housing. These would all be one-bedroom units, targeted to seniors. So this project also includes some ground level outdoor site improvements, including a renovated plaza right at the intersection of Main and Ann Street, as well as some streetscape improvements along both street frontages. The total project cost for the creation of this whole new development, again, 75 units of senior affordable housing, is just over 27 million, and they're requesting 4 million from the DRI, which is about 15% of the total project cost.
I just have a few questions probably for the project sponsor, if we could just get more info. I mean, just, one of the things is, that's a huge project. Is it legit going to be ready? Is it gonna be project ready, or is it not going to be project ready? It's, I mean, look at that picture right there. It is that block. I mean, it's in a great spot. It meets, you know, going through our criteria. It certainly meets them. It's a huge project. It's not a huge ask. Private investment in Little Falls of 27 million. And, you know, out of this process, we come up with a small percentage of that. I mean, it's just, I just think it's a super project.
I agree. Is this gonna take up the entire block?
I mean, look at it, Dan. It looks like it's,
What's going on with the white spaces there? It says parking,
surface parking lot below.
so
And
that's.
there's a covered patio, which it looks like basically where the drive-through is, right? Or am I just tuning that up?
This is like, there's a couple different plan views. This one's just showing what would be ground level at Main Street. And so there's a big grade change along Ann Street. So everything in white's kind of a little bit lower, so traversing that grade. But yeah, it would be open and provide parking for all the residents.
So are we losing or gaining parking in that lot? From the design, it looks like we're going to lose the majority of the M&T parking lot.
Yeah, it looks like we have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the answer is, yes, some of it, where the purple, it becomes an L-shaped building.
Yeah.
So yes, on the east side of that parking lot, that, if you think about what two, one-bedroom apartments and a hallway is, that how much of the, you would lose. But the rest is parking that's currently existing.
So the white is gonna stay parking.
Correct.
The purple is how many stories each?
Total of
It gets
4
4.
stories.
It becomes
4 stories.
They would add 2 on top of the existing building and then 4 in the new section.
Now, Liz, did you mention previously that the money that they're looking for would basically go towards the public improvement?
So yeah, I do think that a lot of what, some some of the benefits and what the DRI funding would help them do that they wouldn't be otherwise able to do is a lot of the public space site improvements, and streetscape enhancements too.
Just two comments, you know, when you take a look at all the criteria that the state gives us, you know, with alignment, readiness, et cetera, what they really don't talk about is the tax base, you know, and Mayor, you need more.
Yeah.
We all do. And, you know, this is one of those projects that would increase tax revenue. But the other thing that I'm looking at is, when you're looking at a $27 million project and they're asking for 4, it appears, maybe it appears that if we offered 2, that they could still handle the project. So this is supplemental money for them to move forward, so maybe the 4 million isn't the full amount that we should provide or recommend.
Yeah, and I can't answer that for them, but that's something I'm happy to bring back to them and ask them. So if there is a reduced request that you'd like me to ask them about, let me know, and we'll come back at our
That's
next.
what I would recommend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah,
So would you all support this at 2 million DRI request?
Well,
I mean, I think it's important enough, it should be a little heavier than 2 off of 27, and your point is well taken, Renee. I mean, we don't have any more land in Little Falls, right? We have water, we have hills, we don't have any more land to build on, we just don't. So if somebody is going to take existing property in the middle of the city and build this huge project, I just wouldn't wanna
I agree.
skimp on it through this process.
Important.
it is a transformational project.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
provides.
Maybe not at 4, but,
Maybe just, you know, maybe.
yeah.
Well, it's a little bit concerning that, yeah, it's only 4 of the 27, but we've only got 9.5.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So it's a big
Right.
chunk of what we've got to spend.
Yeah.
So it's important to look at it in those terms.
Yeah.
And if they can come in at less and say, we can still get it done, that would be wonderful. I would like to see the project stay, but would really like them to come down on the ask.
Are we good for asking for 3? I mean, I think we should go back with a number, because we need to work with real numbers.
Well, and you know, when we're, just for perspective, going back to our meeting 2 weeks ago, we were talking about option 1 for the pedestrian bridge, 5.7.
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking about, and whether or not that even sticks, we don't know, but it's interesting enough that we.
That dream's getting ready to die.
But, I know, I'm saying, but, you know, and then we're looking at some of the, if you're looking at some of the big ticket items, I mean, that bridge was the biggest, pretty much. So just perspective, especially because we did start this meeting with 600, 500, you know, smaller asks, so just to keep it in perspective.
Yeah.
But my only hesitancy goes back to, we only have so much to move forward with, and 4 is a small portion for the total project cost, but it's a heck of a big portion of the money we actually have to spend. That is my only struggle with this project.
Any objection to seeing if they could live with 3, and then we just get more information on it?
No objection.
I feel better with that.
This is Allison from ESD. I would get the other sources of funding for the project. How much are they requesting from HCR? It says that it's going to be senior affordable housing, so they likely are getting tax credits for the project. See how much in tax credits they're getting, see what the sources and uses are, and then you can better dial back your request for DRI.
Rob, are you comfortable with this committee putting forward 3 million potentially?
Yeah, I'm actually really interested in this project, so I support that. Just one of the things I'm thinking about is that when I look at everything we're doing, I feel like I'm still, in my head, it feels like it's really spread around and hard to recognize like a noticeable impact. I think this one could, especially if other Main Street projects went forward with it.
Great point.
Right, like this coupled with the Main Street overall.
Right.
And I'll just note really quick, so some of our preliminary cost estimate information from them about other funding sources too. They had flagged about 2.8 from the DRI grant would be for the renovation of the commercial spaces and the creation of the health and wellness center. 1 million would be for the public space improvements, but then 13 million is coming from low-income housing tax credits, about 8 million from mortgages. around 2 million from HHAP. And then, yeah, so a couple of different funding sources that would help them fund this already. And then again, yeah, the DRI funds, really those public spaces, but then some of the commercial spaces that would directly activate Main Street.
The health and wellness, is that like a public facility or is that just for the tenants?
I believe that would be a public facility that would be open, you know, for the tenants, but also residents as well. I can confirm that for the next meeting.
I think that that's become, that and also, urgent care.
Primary care.
Primary care, sorry, yeah.
Oh, it's now primary care?
I don't know about all of it, but
Okay.
primary care is also
Some of it.
part of it.
They,
Perhaps
they
that
have-
would go with public.
Primary care is related with assets
Mm.
or not? No,
No, not, well, it is a no.
you don't know, you don't, yeah, okay.
TBD.
they do have a letter of interest from Mohawk Valley Health System for this, for the health and wellness facility.
They are open to other opportunities.
Okay, so we'll go back and ask about whether they would be comfortable with a 3 million DRI funding request. Is that
Fair, yeah.
the consensus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This next one is Powerhouse Transformation. So this is the powerhouse that sits right on the Mohawk River. It includes, and would be, the DRI funding, would really focus on rehabilitating the interior of this facility as well as some site improvements to accommodate, public community events as well. On the interiors, this initial phase of rehab would really focus on attracting 3 theme anchor tenants. They've already secured interest from a hypersonics group and a cybersecurity group. Over time, they're looking down the road 3 to 5 years of converting this into a distillery with a restaurant, also including about an 14-foot wide deck around the perimeter to expand public access to the waterfront. And then looking at several different kind of decarbonization strategies. This is not required to meet the stretch energy code due to the size of the building, but they have been working actively with NYSERDA and River Architects to identify some energy efficiency upgrades. They're also proposing to install EV charging stations and are looking into solar, whether it's on the roof or on the site itself. So this total project cost is 1.6 million. Right now, the DRI funding request is sitting at 800,000. We just got some recent guidance from NYSERDA, and this may have to be reduced to a 40% request because to get the 50% request, NYSERDA and the state is requiring a fully carbon neutral facility that is essentially fully electrified, does not use any fossil fuels. Go ahead.
I just think, you know, getting this building back in the tax rolls, and bringing this kind of activities and businesses is an awesome project. For me personally, I would, the long-term viability in a business plan as to how, if it can survive would be, you know, important to understand if I would say we definitely should spend the money.
Well, it's an awesome building. I mean,
Yeah, it's incredible.
it's such a jewel, you know, in
Were
terms of.
turbines mentioned in this before?
So the repowering of the hydroelectric facility would not be part of the total project cost right now. It is a longer term project that the project sponsor is looking into and interested in pursuing, but wouldn't be something that would fall within the DRI.
So that's not part of the price right now.
That is not part of the price right
Liz, if the threshold then becomes 40% of project cost, is the project still viable to the applicant? Mark?
now. In initial conversations, because this was a fairly new piece of information with some of the newer guidance coming out, they seemed comfortable with it, but that is something that we'll continue to kind of flesh out over there.
So the 400 is what, about 600,000 as opposed to 800,000?
40%. Mark, can you just say what you would do? Like, it's just a busy slide, right? EV charging, public entertainment. I heard something about a restaurant, and there's just a lot. Like, what would you do? Shovel ready, boom, you're awarded it. Like, what's the timeline? What happens?
No greater than 23 months, this will all be built out. Let me explain about a couple of tenants. I built Material Science LLC out of Maryland, long history of nanotechnology, silicon carbide, which is Wolfspeed. Gentleman coming in has over 200 U.S. and international patents, been there, done that. Phase one was DOD contract, $750,000, generated 3 patents last year. I wanted to do phase 2. He wants to be in Little Falls, New York, not Griffiths Air Force Base, who was contacted us. Proven track. Met yesterday, walked the space, pick out your office, how much in the main area do you need?
Yep.
Jason Montgomery, who's a Little Falls resident, previously moved back from LA in the entertainment business. I just texted him now, how many initial employees? 3. However, his company, what they do, can bring in 100 people for production runs, similar to a Quiet Place, just larger. So, well-established, you can research both these companies, look them up. Dr. Nagel was here last week. We had limited time to ask questions and stuff like that. Google him, meet him, talk to him. He's here this week. Jason is on this conference call, and he's buying property in the Mohawk Valley and relocating to here.
Thank you.
So, cybersecurity is a startup.
Yep.
But what happens is the space we have today that's been cleared out completely is ready to add any electrical devices they need, research equipment. That can happen next week if I chose to do that. What we learned from one of the utility companies is on the power generation side, involves the river. We're in conflict because NYSERDA would like to have this building all electric. We need natural gas piped in. One of the questions that Liz has for me pertains to that. So we have to kind of pick. But we have a solar quote today. The same contractor is also installing on the Stone Mill this week. They have a long track record, but they have NYSERDA, USDA, other matching funds. So we'd like to get full 800,000, but we know there's going to be some trade-offs if, for example, solar photovoltaic goes through. We have other entities that will come in and add money to that. And the question I've got for Liz, not this meeting, is how do I write this up between now and Friday so we're not taking any more money, but at the same token capitalizing on all these other agencies that want to support us.
Thanks.
No,
Allison, because it's Wolfspeed, is the reason, are you there, Allison? Allison? Wondering if there's other sources within STEAM and cyber.
if there are, identify them, we'll chase them down. But it's ironic because these meetings, people are contacting and saying we want to help in this capacity.
Any other kind of questions or concerns
Well,
on this one?
It's not a concern, it's just, you know, the operating expense has got to be huge, and just what the, I mean, the information that Mark has and the people that he was in town is fantastic. I mean, it's hits so many buttons. I just, you know, the long-term viability is something that I don't know that, you know, we know.
Well, it's been there a long time, and it hasn't fallen into the river
Well, I'm
yet.
not figuring phone.
Not the structure.
I'm talking about
The business plan to support.
Talking about falling into the bank, not.
Yeah.
falling into the-
Well, I was more excited when he talked about turbines in the past. Now evidently that's off the table. But
Yeah, it's only off the table for DRI money. It's not off the table for the overall.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, can you imagine?
yeah, I just think that if Mark has it, and maybe they say no to turbines now, but there's a good chance they can change their mind down the
Yeah.
road. And I can't think of a better person to own the thing than him. And I just thought of something else. There was an issue when I used to work for Burroughs Paper, riparian rights, the water and the water thing. And Mr. Burroughs used to control all the riparian rights in Little Falls. Thus, his hydro plant on the canal, nobody could compete with that as far as taking water to make power. Do you have any insight into what I'm talking about, Mark?
Yes, I do.
Could you just give us the Reader's Digest version?
Yeah, here's a deed in abstract where riparian rights were given back to the powerhouse in 3 different instances.
Oh,
So there's nothing in this deed in abstract that says those are removed from that property.
oh, good.
Now, the rest of the buildings along West Middle Street, that's a different conversation.
And Mark, you're comfortable with the reimbursability aspect of this?
Yes.
Good.
So is everyone comfortable keeping this on,
Keeping it on at 600,000?
600,000, yeah, down to 40%?
Yep.
Rob, you good, Rob?
40% is.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
We'll put it on at 40%, obviously.
Yeah.
Right, it's 640,
What are we calling it, 640?
40%.
400 plus 240.
Okay, so we have just, really quick, we have 6 more new development projects to get through. So maybe, would it be helpful if I go through the projects first really quick, then we come back, and if there's any clear ones that you definitely want to keep, we'll keep them, and then if there's specific questions, or would you like to?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we can go through them
Let's
individually.
keep motoring like
just
we are.
need to,
Yep, we'll get there.
Probably, we'll speak up. So Masonic Lodge Event Hall upgrades, this project really focused, a lot of interior upgrades have been made to this building already. This is a $190,000 DRI request out of about a $475,000 total project. Some of the interior upgrades have been focused on making this kind of a cultural hub and center for Little Falls. So they've put in a lot of audio visual equipment to create essentially a theater that you can see in that bottom picture, and also sound systems. So the DRI project really focuses on enhancing ADA accessibility. It's not fully accessible right now, and also modernizing the kitchen, so upgrading and modernizing the kitchen so that it can complement the uses that they've already started to build out in that facility.
What is the community benefit?
I mean, my understanding, I've been in there since it's been under renovation, and I thought the kitchen had been modernized, at least when I was there in January. I mean, we need more event venues, and it's a historic building, and I think all of that's wonderful. My question is there the capacity to complete the project?
Does this benefit the community?
Yeah, 2 separate questions.
Yeah, that's
Community
right,
benefit, yeah.
but I agree, yeah.
What was the differential being?
So we're still waiting on a little, I mean, they've told us essentially personal private equity. The project sponsor has been ill and has not been able to respond to questions recently, but that is, and in terms of the capacity and some of the more detailed questions about project sponsors for this and other projects, we will be happy to either provide additional information in advance of our next meeting from business plan financing perspective, but we could also, if we want, maybe hold just an LPC working session too, to talk through some of the more kind of private details of individual project sponsors' plans too.
Liz, can't we say that for all of the projects that this applicant has put in?
Yeah, so this project sponsor has 5 projects. This is one of 5.
Right.
Just, yeah.
And I'm saying that
Yeah.
the same
Yeah,
questions
Right.
will arise for each
Each
of
one
the
of them.
other projects.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like we just came off of a landslide of information on every project we just talked about, from the dairyman to the library to the powerhouse, the youth and family center. And for me, for any of these projects, I want to know a heck of a lot more before
Yeah.
I even give it a halfway thumbs up.
Yeah.
Because we just really need to make sure we're making the right decision. We can't do
Right.
that without information. That's just,
Right.
it's that simple.
This is Danny. I mean, I strongly agree with the idea of a LPC work session to dive deeper into the project financials. I think it's a very work we strongly recommend it across all our DRI communities. In fact, all the, every community that I'm, working in, the majority in the state are doing these work sessions, particularly for the point you bring up, Laura. I think you can kind of give that initial thumbs up, thumb down now, but in order to, to make you feel comfortable going to the slate, I think that your idea of a work session would be great. And I'm glad that Liz offered it as well. So I think, we, from DOS's perspective, we think it'd be very helpful overall.
I'll just kind of move a little quickly through the next 4 projects. They are all the same project sponsor. I think it's going to be the same, as you noted, the same questions for this project sponsor that we'll work to get as many answers to as we can before the next meeting, our working session. But just quickly, this next one focuses on the Gervin building. This proposal is to renovate the first and second floors. That's all the DRI project would touch, are the first and second floors. The first floor being renovated to create small business spaces, and the second floor a hotel space. And the DRI funding request on this one is $200,000, total project cost $500,000. The next one is, again, same project sponsor, the Gilbert Mill Distillery. This vacant warehouse or former knitting mill, they're proposing to convert into a carbon neutral distillery with a restaurant and some extensive kind of outdoor deck and site improvements to enhance waterfront access. The DRI funding request on this one is $600,000 with a $6 million total project cost. This next one is the adaptive reuse of the Vincent Manufacturing Warehouse down in Canal Place to convert it into a distillery and chocolate factory, as well as a cafe. So really, again, focused on creating a destination and a series of related destinations across all 5 of these projects. The DRI funding request is $390,000, and the total project cost is $975,000. And then finally, the Sealy Street, which is distillery, is a currently vacant kind of warehouse structure right on Moss Island along Sealy Street. And this DRI project would be the first phase of multiple phases, but it's really focused on stabilizing the structure, creating, again, some outdoor public space or public site improvements, including some decks overlooking the water on either side of the structure. But again, really focused on storing up the structure, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, kind of the guts of the building to make it available and ready for future uses. The total DRI funding request is $200,000 and the project cost is $500,000. And the last of the development type projects is the Elks Lodge renovations. So this project is requesting $450,000 from the DRI with a total project cost estimated to be $500,000. These would include, so this historic structures, it's really focused on improving accessibility into the ground floor. So right now, it is not fully accessible. So a lot of the improvements would focus on accessibility improvements from the site into the structure, but also within the building as well. It includes some roof renovations, also facade renovations to maintain this historic structure, and then full electrical rewiring of the building. There's been a lot of kind of piecemeal patchwork improvements over time. So they're looking at, and they've gotten quotes for complete electrical rewiring of the structure that would be included in this, as well as improving and upgrading some of those community spaces on the first floor, and the second floor looking at some renovations essentially to improve the existing bathroom and make that second floor available for office space or office type tenants.
Any non-Elks want to jump in?
Someone raise your
I'm a
hand.
non-Elk.
I know.
I'm recused, if I'm not an Elks, but I am recused, so I don't know who's left.
Who can speak to this?
Look at that, guys, no pressure. I'm either gonna, the city's gonna love me or everybody's gonna hate me. When I'll never
Well,
be
you
an
gotta
elk
find
again,
Elk
or I'll be
people.
queen of the elks.
I
One of
think hate might be the word, because you're surrounded by Elks people.
I know. Hit me with that. Okay, wow. Whew. No, I mean, I like the project. I'm wondering what's the cost if we focus on the first floor? Because making it ADA accessible, I think, is an absolute must, because, I mean, the building is a landmark. It's home for a lot of community events, private events, et cetera. Definitely need to be able to get people to be able to get into the building and overhaul a lot of those other concerns. That second story, making that overhauled for office space, what's the cost differential if we remove that piece and look at the others?
Yeah, the second floor is honestly not really getting, I mean, the second floor isn't a big cost component of this. It's really, this cost is really focused on the accessibility, the full rewiring, the roof replacement, the facade replacement.
Yeah.
They had talked about a bed and breakfast. We are leaving that concept because a bed and breakfast on the second floor is gonna require so much more code compliance, so many more upgrades and renovations that it wouldn't fit within this cost estimate. Looking at the second floor as making it just a more usable space, and its current configuration is kind of the way they're leaning. And then again, the improvements really focusing on more of those event spaces on the first floor, modernization of that kitchen to accommodate and serve those events. And then I believe the Elks is now looking at they would fund and work towards fundraising for the bar improvements itself. So that wouldn't be part of the prior request as much.
And so,
Also,
as
just to
a
add-
non-elk, it does seem to me, based upon what my perception of the community, is that the building is pretty well utilized. They've recently onboarded a ton of new members. So I don't necessarily look at the Elks as though they are a sinking ship by any stretch. So when we're thinking about capacity and will this be something that's utilized, will people continue to support it financially and otherwise? I think that there's opportunity there.
Yeah. And I think the only point that I'll just raise again, that Danny has mentioned, is that this is a membership organization, which sometimes will raise some flags for the state when they're reviewing it. But maybe.
I thought there had been some discussion about maybe removing the membership policy or modifying it by the Elks. Is that correct? No?
Not that I know of.
100 years.
I don't know.
This is,
Lodge 42.
no,
This was the last place to let women join the Elks, just to give you a heads up.
not a selling point.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Who are you talking to? Hashtag feminist. I don't know.
so this is Danny. I was just gonna say exactly what Liz was gonna say. We've seen the state, from, I don't want to speak for my colleagues in the state team, but I think one of the components when dealing with membership organizations in terms of DRI funding is to really think carefully about the public access and making sure when you talk about access to the public that it's equitable, fully equitable access to the public. That's one, that's kind of the thing that we, the point that we want to stress. I'm going to stop short at, just saying what to do, but that's the point that we really want to stress that the LPC take into consideration. Equity.
So can we, on that point, can we explore a little bit what the membership restrictions might be versus what we might perceive them to be? Because I'm not knocking, I've never been turned away from renting the hall or having a drink.
Yeah, that's a great, that's a fantastic idea. Yeah, by all means, when we say
Membership doesn't necessarily mean exclusive. That's my point.
Oh yeah, I
I
think that you would need to have enough, certainty caught in writing, demonstrating that, that's something that you'd have to take in, you'd have to fully explore and iron out clearly.
And that's one, sorry, just to add, that is one of the things that we were looking into, and anyone can rent the space. And there we have information about space rental that is included in sort of the information that we've been gathering. I believe it is still a membership organization based in, it has to do with their licensing structure, but as for space rental, it's open for rental of public rental. And I believe they are looking at sort of reduction in cost, looking at possibly not doing the roof replacement in shifting around costs.
I'm not suggesting that we treat Masonic Lodge and the Elks Lodge the same way on one hand. On the other hand, it's very similar.
Well, the Masonic Lodge is no longer
Right.
a member, it's a private,
Right.
private,
Private.
retaining the name.
Has it
Yeah,
been for
yeah,
decades?
yeah.
Project sponsor.
Empty.
So then if you go back to the project sponsor who's with Andy Preston, looking for close to $2 million.
Yeah, like just under,
Over
over five
the
projects.
5 projects. Is there a way that we could go back to him and take a look at the ROI on each one of those? I'm sure they've done that, and they ask him to prioritize,
Oh, yeah, we can ask them.
maybe prioritize on the ROI, so it makes sense for us to see the capacity and the adaptability to something. If possible, would you agree with that?
I think that might be something that would come out whenever we workshop it. I think that's just for a different day.
Yeah, because it's a little different when I'm thinking about the Masonic lot, like being a community space and things like that, because that hasn't demonstrated any historical footing, really, you know, other than when Terry Tippin owned it and she would have some events there and things, but that's been a long time ago, whereas Elks has demonstrated their ability to kind of be that resource. This is kind of building on something that they've already shown they can do.
Wow, that's a really good.
So you know what I mean? So it's when we look at like, okay, well, they both want to offer a community space in these similar ways. Yeah, but, you know, we, again, capacity and strength of project and execution, so it's just.
You know, I'd like to remind LPC that this project was originally outside of the boundary, and we thought enough about it to expand the boundary, to include it. So I think we've demonstrated that this organization is dear to us as a member of our community, and I think we'd like to support it. But I think the point that Dan is making from the state is it's going to be a tough sell because of their membership structure. And if we can get around that element by reviewing their bylaws and constitution and their inclusive nature of allowing people to come, then I would like to see the project continue on as a something we recommend.
Part of the 18 million.
Yeah.
One thing to
You
note
know,
too is that they have a history of charitable contribution. They've have estimated 1 million in charitable contribution.
True.
So I don't know if this is all falling on you, Laura, but in terms of keeping this on the table, at least for now,
Yeah, I give it a thumbs up. I give it a gladiator thumbs up.
Melanie, thumbs up?
Okay.
Yeah. I would like to maybe negotiate with them a little bit, whether they can raise a little more money towards
So
putting.
any kind of target we should give them, I think it's helpful to give project sponsors at least something to respond to, so if you wanted to reduce it.
I mean, we're coming up with 90%. If we can get to the
50.
I was gonna say 60.
Wait, I'm not voting.
You're not supposed to be talking.
Let her see.
Yeah, what?
That's a lot of chicken, Dan.
A lot of unrecusing going on there.
But
Or did you have a number?
Geez, I don't know. I mean, what are we looking at with some of these other ones? We're talking about, if we're not doing 100, then what's the split? Liz, can you remind me what the split is if it's a private
If it's
project?
private, it would be a 40% match that would have to be made. You can get up to a 50%, if you're private,
Yeah.
you could get up to a 50% match requirement if, you essentially are carbon neutral. So, and then that match requirement is removed for nonprofits and public entities.
All right. What if we look at, for this one, more of a 70-30?
Yeah, so a 70% DRI funding request, 30% match.
Yeah. Because I'm looking at what's the, how much would we, if this went through, how much would we want to put on the shoulders of the organization to be able to raise money? I would like to think that that's a manageable campaign. But being, again, not Nelk, I don't really know. That's accurate.
We'll go back and see,
Okay.
and then we can get a read, and if that's not viable, what would be viable if they could get,
Yeah, that would be, because I don't really have a
guide.
point of reference on that, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Well, we agree that 70% is 350.
Do we, I don't know, do we agree? Neil?
We agree.
Okay, so we're gonna do these next two projects. One is a branding and marketing one. This is a $750,000 project estimated. It'd be a $750,000 DRI funding request. And this is really focused on improved wayfinding and integrating public art throughout the DRI area. So this would be kind of a series of different signs from some larger map kiosks to help people orient, and better connect from the Empire State Trail to Canal Place to downtown and vice versa. As well as other signs from pedestrian wayfinding signs, parking signs, but then also looking at public art. And public art is really a big component of this, so how that can enhance existing public spaces. So looking at public art throughout the different parks in the DRI area, as well as integrated into the public realm overall.
Are you married to this, Mary Ellen?
This predates my arrival.
What do you think?
I think there's always a place for public art. I do think that there's the potential for, and I'm gonna regret saying this, looking for funding from other sources for some of this.
Yeah.
It would certainly, the wayfinding, I think, is really important. I think there's a real need for that, both on Main Street and at Canal Place. I don't, I'm not clear on how the numbers came up
Right.
and what if you had to break them apart into two different entities, what the price tags would look like.
Yeah.
And I've had one conversation, I think, with you, Liz, about this. So speaking for me personally, I want to know more about what the thinking is behind this.
Yeah, and I will say that for public art installations, those are gonna be some of the higher ticket, higher cost items. So we're kind of ballpark estimating, a moderate size like sculpture at $75,000, a larger statue sculpture. This includes installation, foundation, as well as artist fees at more of like $100,000. So I think if you did narrow this to focus more on the wayfinding component, you could get down to, under $500,000.
Yeah, the real challenge continues to be, and I've said this to a lot of you, weighing the economic impact, improving the tax base, providing more jobs, providing services, attracting industry, and the community that you're trying to serve in terms of a sense of place and that sort of thing. And it's really hard. But the wayfinding seems to me just a no-brainer.
At what number?
Yeah, that I honestly
What
don't
number?
know.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I can tie projects together, but this sort of takes me back to what Rob was talking about last time relative to the 167 bridge and combining wayfinding and bike paths. And I procrastinated and said I'll do it tomorrow every day for the last 2 weeks, but there's some really cool bike path markings and stanchions around the Syracuse area, particularly that they've just installed where the Empire Trail comes off the trail and goes through major city streets, including Erie Boulevard, that look like really, really inexpensive versus, like the $2 million that was proposed for the 167 bridge. So the idea of wayfinding and of bike directing and protecting, I think is, when you look at all the projects we're doing and what we're trying to make Little Falls into, is enormous, especially when you include the canal project. I don't know how that relates to this.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think there's ways with art relative, particularly with the art center, getting local or regional artists to do things that aren't $75,000 or, we have some really cool things along the park.
Like we did with the benches.
Right.
bunch
You know,
project years
there's-
ago with
There's
art
ways
center.
to do that
Yeah.
with such an engaged community.
Yeah.
I think if there's a way through the rest of this process to combine wayfinding with bike directing
Mhm.
and walking would be really important.
And there's things less expensive than sculptures and
Yeah.
installations.
Right.
There's murals, there's all kinds of things that we could be creative
We have
around.
so much canvas in this city.
I know.
Oh my gosh, we have
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
canvas in this city.
Yeah,
to mural it up.
We could do too, as part of the, set aside, like, set amount for a mural fund. And it doesn't necessarily, we can identify the buildings, but you could have a set aside and then maybe focus on the wayfinding around. And what we've shown here is that the loop, the big loop connector, so where you're proposing a lot of your bike pedestrian infrastructure upgrades. Sorry, I think I cut someone off online, Dan.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just to kind of connect it to Neil's point, is I'm just not comfortable funding wayfinding if the way that they're finding their way somewhere or whatever is not safe. And I don't feel like we've yet really made it that way. So I feel like this project would have to be connected with some other things in order for the wayfinding to really have an impact that makes sense.
Just when that, I don't know how many people have been down at Canal Place the last few weeks. It is swamped with bicyclists, swamped
We were there
every
today,
day.
at lunch, yeah.
every day. Some of them are staying, some of them are passing through, but it's, and I can't imagine when the canal project is done, what that's gonna look like. So I think getting people out of Canal Place and up in the city is a huge, huge, huge opportunity.
Yeah, definitely.
We haven't really discussed that yet.
How would they know?
I know, right, yeah, they don't.
Liz, would it be possible to incorporate wayfinding into our enhancement fund and change the name of that from downtown enhancement to Little Falls enhancement, and maybe set aside some additional monies in that for that purpose? I just can't buy into the public art and wayfinding at $750,000, given what we have to spend.
Well, and you bring a good point. Actually, Tony, it says too in the description that there's facade improvements, signage, lighting.
Right.
So what does that mean?
Yeah.
And is there a
Maybe
way to
it-
build that up?
It gets a bite at the apple there, and at that point, it'll be more refined.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Mary,
I'm all for
Barkley
city
with
control.
HCR. Hi.
Yeah, Mary, go
so-
ahead, Sam.
And, I will also ask the city to confirm this as well too, but often when we are speaking about signage in this context, that would be, say, for business owners for their, say, to upgrade their signs, to replace awnings or something like that. So the focus is less on, say, wayfinding, creating signage for the city. And I will, will defer to Danny as well too. That would be more under the activity for a branding and marketing type activity.
Thanks, Mary. So with the understanding, as Mary Ellen said, that there's potential money for art and a second bite at the apple through the $600,000 downtown grant fund. Does anybody have a strong objection about just taking this off the table, just dropping it as a standalone DRI project?
This is Danny. I just wanted to chime in and say that, there's another Mohawk Valley community, Gloversville, is pursuing placemaking grant, or considering, I should say, they're considering pursuing a placemaking grant in partnership with the Mohawk Valley Economic Development District for Gloversville. And that particular solicitation is all about regional partnerships and regional collaboration. So it may be worth talking to MVED about, wayfinding, branding, marketing, placemaking activities too. That federal solicitation through the USDA, and it's called the Regional Creative Placemaking Initiative, or Regional Placemaking Innovation Challenge, I should say, grant.
Thank you, Danny.
There's also the William Pomeroy Trust that invests a lot of money in that type of thing.
So would you all like to recommend this whole project as a candidate for other funding sources?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Rob, you good?
Off the list.
I'm good with that.
Thank you.
Okay. I feel like maybe, hopefully this can be a quick one, but the downtown grant fund, so 600,000 set aside of the DRI funds for smaller scale projects. Is everyone in support of this?
Definitely.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. How efficient we are.
And Liz, I just did want to
Yeah.
bring up, just in going back to thinking about wayfinding. So the fund is really something that, you might think of projects that are not yet, say, identified. There may be interest in some smaller scale projects already out there, but it's really going to be not necessarily work that's going to be done in the city on public spaces. It may be more something you want to do facades. So I just bring that up to highlight that wayfinding and adding signage throughout the DRI target area may not be something that would fall under the scope of the fund. It may be something more you want to provide grants to business owners or tenants or something like that, rather than spending a specific amount of money to be installing signage. That may be something more of like adding to a streetscape project, or the specific branding and marketing activity.
But Mary, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. I was
Please.
just gonna, for the murals, this could fund murals on private buildings though, right? The downtown grant fund?
Yes, that may be an activity that is something that is considered eligible. But again, just thinking of the total, when we were looking at the previous cost of that 750, just taking into account, the current project, how much money would the, city like to possibly spend, say, on public art or something like that.
So where do we put wayfinding?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
we want wayfinding, but we don't want the art in wayfinding price tag. So where do we put
so
wayfinding?
do you all want wayfinding as a DRI project?
Yes. I would like.
Did we,
So what we could do is
are we
take,
talking about other funding sources though, through that placemaking grant through embed? Is that why we got away from it for the DRI money? So I don't think we wanted to get away from wayfinding as a whole. I think where we went with that, maybe we didn't go in the right direction. Was we thought there could be other funding sources, maybe.
There's other funding sources, but there's also the Main Street project, there's also Sturzner Park, there's also Sealy,
Right,
which all could include
wayfinding.
some type of letting people know
yeah,
how to
so
get.
the benefit of this project is you're gonna get cohesive DRI-wide wayfinding signage, not piecemeal project by project. One thing we could do is if you wanna look for other funding sources for more of the public art pieces, we could scale this back so it focuses on just creating a wayfinding system throughout the DRI area.
Scale it back to 350.
Yeah,
Probably.
We could see what we could get with 350,
That was-
you all know.
yeah, that was what I was thinking.
Well, with the projects that you mentioned, for wayfinding, I mean, we could have some consistency there because the project sponsor on all of those major projects is the city.
Yeah.
So it's not really splitting it apart.
Yeah, why can't we
You know what I mean?
coordinate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
And then
still,
this could fill in gaps between those projects though, too.
I'm still leaving this one out. Completely. And focus on wayfinding with all the other projects coordinated through the city
And other sources, other funding sources.
and other funding sources.
And be creative with the downtown fund.
Yeah.
Because Mary, isn't the city writing the rules for that? I didn't mean to say that sort of flippant, but that ends up being city-controlled fund. How many projects, how much per project, as long as it's, meets the criteria?
Sure. So yes, the city is going, the fund is advanced, would be developing a plan that would spell out those activities that would be the focus of the fund. Part of that is also considering what would be considered, ancillary activities. It may be something where doing wayfinding may be considered more of an ancillary activity, like you're doing things for sidewalks or doing pavement kind of work like that. So while this could be a consideration, I just caution using the fund specifically as a way to fund a larger wayfinding project, as the fund is generally used for those projects that are not necessarily known now, that are for, say, facade improvements or something like that.
Thank you very much.
Can't the city also, or the planning committee require? Yeah. Us, like not the planning board. Can it, like, let's say Dairyman, let's say it ends up going forward. Insisting that they do something from here to here. I know a lot of communities, you have to plant trees, you have to.
It just gets a little slippery. Gets a little slippery. Let's keep our eye on the ball, man.
Yeah. It's a good ball.
Liz, is there a possibility?
There's more money there.
Downtown fund?
It's pretty.
The downtown fund's capped at 600,000. We're
600.
asking for the maximum amount.
Yep.
So is everyone comfortable, is everyone comfortable with reducing this project, but still including the wayfinding component? Who wants to include the wayfinding component as a DRI project? Who wants to remove this project entirely from DRI?
I feel like we can be creative and,
I think there's other ways.
I feel like we can attack this from multiple angles and achieve something great.
I would remove it.
just think the mayor's gonna want some unity across the city with signage.
Yeah.
And
we do now.
I think if you just left $250,000 in there to protect that opportunity.
It's not much in terms of the whole.
I think the committee may be disappointed eventually with all these different kinds of signs throughout the whole city that you couldn't.
Rob, are you good with taking it off? I don't know if you saw those hands or.
No, I think I got drowned out there. I said, yeah, I'm good with taking it off.
Renee, how do you feel?
So I don't. I think
Okay.
it's best to leave something in there for the sake of unifying the city.
Okay, so maybe just because we don't have to make any final decisions right now, for the next meeting, we will give you a sense of how many signs and where maybe they could go for a reduced cost, looking at a 250 to 350,000 range.
And I think the other thing is, if there's, you're saying the city can make the rules around the downtown fund. I mean, if there can be a wayfinding element in there, then, but it's not gonna be it's not going to be 250,000 or whatever it is you're saying for wayfinding, so that may not work.
And we'll have to double check, but they're making the rules within HDR's state rules
Yeah.
already.
Right,
So
for sure.
there's already.
Right, correct. There are specific activities that, that the fund would not generally, would be able to fund as part of that. So just keeping that in mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're gonna keep the downtown grant enhancement fund on at 600,000. Does everyone agree with that?
Yes.
Just for anyone that's on, I do want to confirm that everyone that submitted to the open call but submitted a short form application, all of that information is going into the strategic investment plan in support of this project. So although that doesn't guarantee you DRI funding, it does help us justify the need and the demand for this grant fund. It's telling me to stop talking. All right, we just paused our video. But you would have to reapply essentially once that grant is funded through the state and established by the city. I know we're pretty much close to closing. I just wanted to revisit a couple public improvement projects really quick that were big ticket items that we had deprioritized and see if anyone has any specific leanings one way or the other. So one is the Albany Street two-way conversion. This is converting the street into two-way from one-way to two-way. It's going to require a fair amount of reconfiguration, especially right here where the bridge and 167 comes into Albany Street. Likely maybe two new signals. This project, I think, I'll let the mayor speak to it too, because it is theirs.
I don't know if, I just haven't received any sort of public outcry that people really want this, which is huge, right? I mean, this is a sea change in Little Falls. It's a lot of money. As I talked about before, how there's not money for City Hall. We generally have CHIPS funding for streets. If our heart was set on doing this at some point in time after some sort of traffic study, well, 1.5 I just don't think that it's viable. I think it was a good idea. I'm glad that we discussed it. I'm glad that Chet spent a lot of time on it and others. But at this point, as we need to lot projects off, I think it's lot worthy.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about reducing it, but the sheet from 2 weeks ago was 1.3 million for this
That
project.
was a mistake.
Yeah.
When we presented it, it was at 1.5 million. We had some last minute changes when I was talking with one of our, engineering subconsultants about. And a lot of the.
Either way, 1.3 was still too much from what we talked about,
Has
so.
to do with some of the traffic, like cascade and traffic impacts that will happen.
Dan, what do you think, Daniel?
Forget it.
Anyone feel
No. As I said before, Manhattan is full of one-way streets. We got one-way street, goes 2 blocks, and we want to change it.
Rob, strong feelings either way?
Strong feelings that we do not include it.
Okay. We're good,
Is
Liz?
everyone else okay with
Yes.
removing this project from the DRI? Still considering it for maybe CHIPS or other funding?
Is there any way we can keep some streetscaping in it?
Yeah, that's what we talked about last time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we all thought it was a low priority, but can we just make it more attractive with trees?
Again, I mean, maybe,
Power line.
not to bring everything back to the, there's only 600,000 hopefully in the downtown fund,
Right.
but maybe if that price tag is right, we could help it in that regard. I mean, I just think, we have projects, if we get to the point where we want 5% of a project, it just muddies the water.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think this would be a good candidate too, if you wanted to go after like EFC's, Green Infrastructure Innovation Grant Program, that would give you some really great streetscaping. I think you're likely gonna have
Chase
to
that.
start moving curb lines if you wanna make that space in there for like trees and vegetation too, which still is gonna make it an expensive project.
Yeah. I also go back to Rob's comment that he's made a few times about having enough density that you're making an impact, not spreading it out over so many things that it's not really great. So
Okay. So we're all good with removing this one?
Boy, when Chet comes back, he's gonna be surprised.
Hope you enjoyed your vacation.
Other one that we wanted to talk about, because it is such a large funding request, is the pedestrian bridge.
Well, this is, near and dear to what the whole project's all about, is getting Canal Place connected to Main Street. And, right now, it's, for $5.5 million, it seems like a lot. It is a lot. I mentioned the engineer a couple weeks ago about possibly looking at, and I'm sure this probably won't be popular, but, putting a tunnel under Route 5 and connecting with the existing railroad tunnel, which has about 3 positives to it. One, he said it would be cheaper. 2, safer, much safer than walking over the railroad tracks. And 5, and then I was thinking outside the box, like what would the Department of Transportation, the road people, how do they feel about a bridge versus a tunnel? And the price and all of that. Now, big cities have subways. I've seen pictures of European train tunnels are gorgeous. They don't have to be a dank, weird-looking thing like we have.
I think the
They
one
could be
looking for
heated
is
up.
terrifying.
I thought about this a lot. There'd be a real issue trying to get accessible once you get on the Main Street side. But I'm just throwing that out there. It's gonna have to be a group effort with what we do, but $5.5 million seems awful steep. One of the reasons is because of the height, it has to be over top of the tracks. So we're already under the tracks now. And in wintertime and all that stuff, it'd be a lot safer. And according, off the top of his head, Chet thought it'd be around $2 million to put a tunnel under there.
I think the biggest challenge too with the tunnel that you're not getting that you would get with the bridge is it's not fully accessible.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you're getting down into the tunnel, but if you're in some kind of, you need some wheelchair or other mobility device, you're not gonna be able to.
Yeah, to
Which is by
connect.
the elevator or the ramp,
How do you
yeah.
feel about that option there?
the tunnel, that's the first I've heard of a tunnel. That's why I haven't digested it. We really need to think about the projects that we have. We could come up with alternatives.
Yeah.
I love this project since day one. Our application was reconnecting the heart of the city. And some of these projects, you know, if 167 falls off, and we'll talk about that, I think it'll fall off, I think it should fall off. But, so now we're not reconnecting that, we're not reconnecting the bridge, we're not reconnecting this. I don't even want to say run the risk of, because that's the wrong term, but they end up being a project here, Sturzner Park, and then, you know, City Hall, and then we can sort of connect it with some Main Street stuff. I'm not just trying to ramble, but we really wanted to reconnect Little Falls because it's disconnected now. And there's 3 projects that did it, right? Sealy Street gets us from the money reimagined, is putting in down there by Moss Island, all the way up to the William Street Bridge. And then this, which is simply too expensive. And, you know, 167, which widens, you know, and gets people there. So it just, I mean, I think at 5.7 that it's simply too expensive. But I think that we should also think about, as Rob talked about 2 weeks ago, sort of bang for our buck as we talk about the projects that we are going to put forward and can sort of group together if we get to the Canopy and then Main Street and sort of some of that. So sort of a long answer to a short question, but man, I was with this for years, this pedestrian bridge, and it's just too stinking expensive.
Mark, can I add on to that?
Please, Rob.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with Mark that like I really like this project to begin with, but just to connect it to our wayfaring discussion, I think from my perspective, one of the reasons that we talk about needing the wayfaring is that the way the city's designed currently, there aren't visible, like obvious ways to get to these various places from one point to another, from Main Street to Canal Place. Things like bike paths and pedestrian bridges, I think, provide that obvious avenue, but that's a lot more expensive than signage. But I think really what we have is a design problem, and I'm also not sure if 5.7 is, you know, if we can do that with what we have available. So that's kind of my conundrum, but I really do like this project.
And taking it off allows for other good projects.
Many.
Right? I mean, there's a lot that we can do with
5.7.
the 5.7. I mean, it's a zero-sum game. It's, you know, something, there's just room.
These projects tend to end up costing more than they were expected than less.
This is Danny. Does the city have a capital improvement plan?
I mean, in theory,
But I mean, I think one interesting activity, you know, potentially be good to, you have a lot of, you know, really important public, you know, kind of capital projects lined up through DRI that you've thought about, you know, in addition to all the work going on with Reimagine and the railroad. It may be worth considering one of those, I mean, because that can help set the table for more funding specifically for these particular infrastructure projects too. Like have a clear like plan around kind of future infrastructure improvements. So that way, you know, funding agencies can see, in addition to the SIP and DRI process, they can see another, you know, planning document that bolsters the case for these projects too. So that's just,
thank you, Danny.
that's just one suggestion.
And if we look at some of that, the DRI public workshops that we did too, because remember, we're sitting at this table and ultimately, you know, we get to whittle this down to, you know, who wins the Hunger Games and goes to Albany, but we need to think about what the community is expressing as well. And this pedestrian bridge, and yes, I love it and I want it, but that price tag is heavy to do it right. Otherwise, why do it at all? Which we talked about last time. And it's not exactly seeming to be a priority that's resonating with our youth community or those that did the public workshop. It's not up there at the top of the list like some of the other ones we've talked about. We need to recognize that also in our decision-making.
Yeah, I would just point out that I think that's more of a visitor project than a resident project. I think it could serve both, but I think it's probably more of a visitor one.
Tony, what do you got?
I'm for removing it.
Removing it.
Melanie, what do you think about this pedestrian bridge? Come on, let's keep it.
So who's good with removing it?
Can I emotionally abstain?
No.
Is that not an option?
Is this a vote to keep them?
Suddenly I'm a member of a bridge committee, I didn't tell you.
Rob, you good with removing it?
Yeah, I actually wasn't advocating for keeping it, just expressing my conflicted views, but the price tag's just too much. I'm good with removing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I go with what Rob says. Sad, but it is the right thing to do. Financially, it's the right thing to do.
I think that's a lot of great progress for tonight. I know we're well over. Are there any other projects you really wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
Let me just revisit, I know last session we talked about the Sealy Street Promenade. We
Yeah.
all liked it, but I think we were talking about, can we pull that thing off spending a lot less? Because the state owns most of the property, and perhaps there were some other funding sources that could infiltrate and, you know, leverage. So can we look at that, 1.8 million as a possible reduction?
Yeah, we could, give you a breakdown of what went into this cost estimate. So it is repaving the full length of it, creating that parking area just to the west of Canal Place, but then there is, I think, some lighting and guide rail as well. So maybe it's more, I don't know if you want to focus. What we could do for the next meeting is just give you a breakdown of the cost so that you can see where you feel comfortable cutting things versus what you would not want to remove.
That is a little unique with the majority being owned by the canal, basically, yeah.
But so now, I'm glad that you brought that up, because we really need to discuss this in depth next time.
Yes.
I mean, we need
It
to
connects to the other.
have our eyes wide open to the money that Reimagine is spending right down there.
That's right.
And
We want to enhance that connection.
exactly right.
But 1.8.
I mean, was that number 8 million?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that right? It was 8, right there?
Right.
I mean, that's,
And that's not what the bike path people are spending down there. They're still working on the bike path.
yeah, almost done, yeah.
And one other thought on Sealy Street, the hydro plant's still running, I assume.
Yeah.
You know, that's not safe water, in my opinion. When you have a hydro plant and you guys are out there in boats, if somebody falls into that water, and that, I know a kid drowned or something years ago up north. These hydro plants it's dangerous, that water. And the other side's the river, which occasionally is dangerous too. And you got a narrow strip of land between these two waterways, which they're not Glimmerglass State Park. You land in these waterways and you're not even a good swimmer, you're gonna be surprised unpleasantly. And it makes it look from this little picture here that you could just jump in that water and take a nice dip. No, not at all. You don't wanna be swimming in this water and above that hydro plant plus the lock. And we're encouraging people to go down there, and I think it's a accident waiting to happen. It's not safe, it's not a safe spot.
That's why we want to improve it.
Yeah, with the guardrails and.
You know, I don't see any handrails or do not jump in the water.
This
Yeah, we'll
rendering,
up-
this is
yeah,
a little bit
yeah.
of a holdover. So we're not proposing like water actions or anything as part of this project right now.
There's the other project that I just want to comment on that everybody loved was well, actually, there's two, if you can bear with me. The Sturzner Park improvements, spending $2 million to repurpose Sturzner Park. I'm struggling with that price tag all the time, and I'm just wondering what we can do to maybe accomplish that, you know, upgrade, but not totally rebuild a park for $2 million.
We're gonna break down those.
Well, it's park and the parking, right?
Yeah, right, which is, parking is really needed,
Provide that in.
but we're talking about, you know, a complete, redoing the whole footprint of the park, basically. And lastly, the city dog park in Columbus Park. People seem to want a dog park, but let's not put it in Columbus Park.
I think at this point, it's, not gonna be in Columbus.
Okay.
No, I agree with you.
All right.
Yeah.
Could be-
We're asking the
could be a
kids
city
where
hall.
What did the kids say? They have any good ideas?
they just want it.
We don't care. They'll go.
Yeah, I mean, they want a chocolate factory and dog park and, you know why.
Call it a day.
So I know we're a bit over, so I would like to open it up just to public comment. If you're online, feel free to unmute yourself. You can also drop something in the chat, and if anyone here too.
Anyone online first have any public comment? Once? Twice? Online?
And then in the room, yeah. If you come up just a little bit so the speaker will pick you up.
Yeah, hi, this is Tom Overman from the Elks Lodge, and I'll speak because half the room can't. But a couple things on the Elks Lodge. So we met with the architect. Architect had a great idea. One of the things that was $100,000 of the 500 was to put an elevator in. And he said, well, you know, you can probably do a chairlift of some sort for a whole lot less and still be effective and so forth. So we reworked the number on that and a couple things. And we looked at the roof, and the roof was $60,000 of the original ask. And the roof, you know, it kind of looks like it's, you know, 25 years into a 30-year life. So I'm sure somebody would be mad at us if we don't fix it now, once it starts leaking in a couple of years. But on the other hand, it's not leaking now. It's not like the City Hall roof that already leaked 10 years ago. So those couple of things will actually save a big chunk. And so somebody earlier mentioned like a 350 number, and I think we can actually do an awful lot for a DRI ask of less than that. So, you know, because we know more than we used to know. The other question came out was ROI, and I think Allison had mentioned, because I sent her notes on this. We are lousy about keeping records of tooting our own horn. But just based on what we've done and then extrapolating out, it's over $1 million in fundraising that the State Elks Association says we've done. And so, you know, on a $300,000 DRI, that's a 3-to-1 return on investment, which seems pretty dang good. And the second thing is, again, we're lousy at it, because I look at the records, and there's a few years where nobody filed any reports. But just in the 20 years or so we have electronic records, we show 29,000 people through the doors, which I was surprised it was that much. And that's all sorts of events, from baby showers to, you know, funeral dinners. So anyhow, and on the main thing, someone mentioned it, there was a piece in the bylaws that said you had to have the member sponsor. That hasn't been enforced for years. We've officially taken it out of the bylaws, so it's not even there anymore. Well, actually, we didn't change it. We didn't take it out. Somebody suggested just taking it out and be silent. I said, no, let's actually insert the word not. So it used to say member sponsor is required. Now it says member sponsor is not required, just to be clear on that. So anyhow, that's my 2-minute version.
Clarifying, thank you.
Anybody else? Just a reminder, our next open to the public LPC meeting will be June 21st at 6. Kind of following back up on that conversation about a working group session to talk through some of the really nitty-gritty details and financial aspects of projects. We will coordinate with you all to get a date set in advance of that 21st meeting.
So are we gonna get a tally of what the number of?
I can send that probably like tomorrow, just based on what we removed today with the removal.
Are we close?
Yeah. I mean,
What's the score?
so with the pedestrian
We're down 3
bridge
reruns.
and all the removed 6, like around 7.2 million, which gets you down closer to a 20 million. And then you have a couple on hold and some that will need more information. So, I mean, we're sitting closer to 20 million, which is a big improvement from 28 million at the beginning of the meeting, so.
Well, Neil and I think you should move the dog park to City Hall. It'll.
Oh, yeah.
That'll save a lot of money, right?
They can drink all the water that comes through.
Oh, see, problem solved.
Perfect.
Two birds, one stone.
It's like the sheep that mow the lawn at the solar. Right.
Let's go, we walk out back.
Well, thank you everyone online for joining us and sticking on a little longer. And thanks everyone
Thank
here
you.
too for joining.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Danny.
Hey, Danny.
See you
See
Friday.
you Friday, Danny.
See you Friday. Take care.
Thank you.